So wouldn't you know it, Electronic Arts is in the Nintendo news again. So I was kind of looking forward to talking about this news story, and then a couple of people actually asked me about it and were curious if I was going to make a video about this, and I figured it was pretty important to do so, to at least, share my thoughts and put my 2 cents in. You more than likely know what I'm talking about. A couple of days ago, Electronic Arts, somebody from Electronic Arts, and I super don't remember who it was actually, but somebody came out and basically made a public statement stating that we are considering or looking at options when it comes to Nintendo and developing for their hardware in the near future. Basically saying we're always looking to keep any relationships open. Nintendo is included, and they should be a viable option for us and our software at any given time based on what's happening at the market and what seems relevant. And obviously that includes the Wii U, the 3DS, and of course their next generation console, whatever hardware Nintendo ends up doing next, the NX, whatever that thing turns out to be. Obviously, all of those are being considered as options for EA. And, a lot of people kind of got mad about this. Some people are really excited about this. And I can definitely understand why. There's an argument to be made all around. Personally, I don't really see it as an argument to be made. You probably could even figure out how I would actually feel about this. I think it's ultimately good news. I would very happily welcome EA back on board with Nintendo. I was really disappointed the way things with them and with EA and Nintendo played out right at the beginning of the Wii U's life cycle. And, it was a shame because at first it was being touted as this great partnership between Electronic Arts and Nintendo. And we all remember the E3 press conference where they came on stage and basically said so, and things looked like there was going to be a really bright future there. And then it fell apart pretty quickly after that. Nintendo, I don't think, wanted to use the Unity engine or Origin, and it became this big old hopping mess. And EA released a couple of not great games on the system, and, that was that. That was really all that came of that whole thing. And it's a shame. Because I don't really want Nintendo to miss out on a lot of the best games that EA could actually produce. It's kind of probably going to be a controversial statement, but honestly, I sort of like EA, and I know that that's the most insane thing anyone could say, especially someone who as a diehard Nintendo fan as well, but I really feel like they have the potential to do a lot of great things. And they do some of the worst things in the industry, obviously. And we all know, 5 or 10 years ago, they were voted the worst company in the world and the worst company in gaming, for how they were treating their employees. And I totally get that. And I believed it. I believe that at that time that was true. But something I also believe, and this is just me personally, there really isn't that much evidence to this, I'd be willing to bet that they probably changed a lot of that. I'm sure their working conditions are much different. And I will say that they have some of the worst business practices in the industry. Obviously the DLC thing, they're one of the worst offenders of the DLC problems today. And that is a horrible thing. And it is not anything that I ever want Nintendo themselves to become a part of. But my whole defense of why I think it would be great to have EA back on board with Nintendo's hardware is that just allowing EA back on board to develop and release their games, maybe Battlefront can come out on a Nintendo system, and like I said, Mass Effect and Dead Space, all these franchises I very much want to be on Nintendo's hardware. If Nintendo allows them and that relationship gets fixed in these games, and EA as a company starts releasing their games on Nintendo's hardware, that doesn't mean that Nintendo is going to become as bad as EA. I mean, that's not how it works. It's not like if you share your home with somebody, you become that bad of a person, just because you guys are sharing that space. And I think that that's true in the gaming industry, and it's definitely true of Nintendo. I kind of have this theory that if Nintendo did start working with EA again and EA's games were going to be releasing on the NX and the Wii U and whatever going forward, that hopefully there would be something where Nintendo would say, hey, you can't do some of these really bad things that we don't like. And to be fair, that's probably part of what killed the relationship in the first place. Hopefully the two of them can find a nice compromise and start working together again, because as much as you guys may or may not want to admit it, personally, the way I see it, it would only be good for Nintendo and its audience and fan base to have games like Mass Effect and Dead Space and Madden and FIFA and Battlefield and, of course, Battlefront back on Nintendo's consoles. It would be very, very good for the system and the fan base. I mean, you've heard my feelings on third parties. Yes, I know Nintendo doesn't quote-unquote need them, but I think that it would still be good for them. And personally, I like the idea of having all the third-party stuff on the same console. I can play all my Nintendo stuff. And I want those third-party games to take advantage of the quirky ideas that Nintendo uses. I liked getting some third-party games, some multiplayer games on the Wii back in the 7th gen, where we'd get unique controls because of the Wii remote for the Wii version. I thought that was great. And the idea of getting like a Destiny or a Battlefront on the Wii U and being able to use that gamepad for all sorts of different things, that's exciting. Like, that would be the better version of the game, I would think. Same. You've heard me talk about Fallout. There's a Pip-Boy in your hand. Why not make a version of Fallout 4 that could work and run on the Wii U and take advantage of the gamepad and make up for the lack of graphical capabilities that version would have? I mean, there's so many cool opportunities there. And that's, of course, one of the many reasons why I feel like it's good to fix the third-party relationships, and why when it comes to EA, I would like them to be on Nintendo's platforms. Now, I totally understand that there is a problem, like I said, with the DLC stuff and some of the things that DICE has done, and we don't want those things associated with Nintendo systems and blah, blah, blah. And I understand where people are coming from, and I hate that stuff as much as you do, but I just want to reiterate this point. I don't think that it's going to tarnish Nintendo as a game developer, Nintendo's image, or the console and hardware that those games would be released on. That's not how those things work. You know what happens if EA releases a shitty game with a bunch of dumb DLC that no one likes and is totally trash, and it releases on Nintendo's console? You know what? Then that game just sucks, but Nintendo and the console is just fine. It doesn't matter if a shitty game releases on a console. It doesn't make the console shitty. And Nintendo, more than anyone, can still back up their console and make up for bad games by third-party releases by releasing their own great first-party games, as well as the third-party exclusives that they've worked with things like Bayonetta. So it's all just a give and take, and you have to think of the audience. And solely because I just don't have the fear that some of the other naysayers do, that if EA comes back on board, that it's going to ruin Nintendo's personal game development. I don't believe that. Like, Nintendo will keep doing everything Nintendo does. They have stuck it out through all of these changes in the gaming industry these last couple of years and couple of generations to keep doing the things that they do. They've been willing to sacrifice some of the sales and some of the perception in the industry to say, no, we make our games a certain way. We have a very specific business model, business practices, and principles that we believe in, and we will not compromise those when it comes to our product. So a shitty Battlefield game released on the Wii U isn't Nintendo's product. It's still EA's product, just made available on Nintendo's system. So as long as Nintendo's product, meaning their hardware, their consoles, and their games, as long as those don't suffer a decline, then it doesn't matter who's releasing what on their system. The only thing that could happen, like I said, I think, would be a benefit where more people say, wow, I can get my Maddens and my Grand Theft Autos and my Destinies and all these things also on the same system. I can get Mario and Zelda and Metroid. Well, hell yeah, I better get me one of those Wii U's, and I better get me one of those NX's. Like, that's how I would see it playing out in the future, and that's why I think it's a good thing. So I don't know, that's kind of my long thoughts on the whole topic there. I like EA for the things that they do well. I like Visceral Games. I think DICE has a lot of potential. Also, let me also remind you, I talked about Battlefront a couple times. Here's probably another reason why, personally, I am more than willing to sacrifice some shitty DLC practices to have EA's games back on board with Nintendo's consoles, is because that is the only way, and I hope you guys are listening to me here, it is the only way we will see Star Wars games on a Nintendo console. EA owns 10 years of licensing rights for Star Wars games. There is no Star Wars video game that will release anywhere at any time in the next 10 years on any platform, including a phone, for God's sake, that isn't at least published by EA, if not directly developed by them. EA and Star Wars go hand in hand in the gaming universe right now. Love it or hate it, that's the way of it. And you know me and my Star Wars fanship. I want Star Wars games, and I would love them on my Nintendo console. I'm happy to play them on my PS4 or Xbox or PC, but I would love them on my Nintendo console. And if you love Star Wars games too, and maybe you're a Nintendo-only gamer, you kind of have to get on board with the idea of EA working with Nintendo again. That's the only way we're going to see Star Wars games. And so, to finish up with my point, it would be good to see Star Wars games, Madden, FIFA, Dead Space, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, whatever other things that EA does, which is a lot. It would be good to see those games on a Nintendo console. I would like to see them. I wouldn't buy them all. I don't play Madden or FIFA, but I would play Dead Space and Mass Effect on my NX or Wii U or whatever. I would absolutely do it. And of course, Star Wars. So that's why I'm personally okay with it. And I do understand the reasons why some people aren't. But like I said, just don't get in the mindset that EA's shitty business practices would make Nintendo start having shitty business practices. They obviously will stick to their guns and be the great company they've always been. So those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Hopefully it helped kind of hearing my thoughts, and I'm sure it made a lot of people mad because I don't hate EA and I would happily see them back on Nintendo's consoles. But, what can I say? That's how I feel, and I'm happy to say it. So those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Thanks as always for tuning in, and this is Rob of Rule 2 Review. I'll catch you guys next time on another video.